The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Taylor. Welcome to the first of 5 teleseminars for our group. Our group's name is Uncoupling, the Divorce Resource Group of Greater Philadelphia. Today's 45-minute teleseminar is dealing with the topic of should I stay or should I go? And today we're going to discuss different issues facing individuals at the very beginning of the divorce process. Before we start, though, I want to tell you a little bit about our group. We're a group of 10 professionals designed to provide information drawing on our experience and from our perspective about divorce. We're committed to providing information and giving guidance to people who are going through the divorce process. Our paramount goal with these seminars is to give information, to take away some of the unknowns and dispel some of the common myths about divorce. With that said, we are not offering advice during these seminars, but instead we're helping people educate themselves about the divorce process. What we wanted to do with this group is essentially create a one-stop shop of professional resources for all issues that might arise during the different stages of divorce. So let me introduce who's in our group. First of all, again, my name is Andrew Taylor, and I'm a family law attorney at Shemtob Law in Bluebell. Allie Collier, she's an insurance account executive at Johnson, Kendall & Johnson. Elizabeth Butler, who we'll hear from today, is one of our speakers. She's a clinical social worker and therapist. Sheila Brennan, who's a divorce coach. Valerie Clark-Roden, who is a client relations manager at Hodling Investing Management. Mark Bradford, who is a certified public accountant and forensic accountant at Asterion Consulting. Laura Stagosi, who's an attorney, and she specializes in estate planning at Diamond, Polsky & Bauer. Bill Donahue, who is also an attorney and a mediator at Transitions Mediation Center. Ken Feynman, who is a branch manager at Approved Mortgage Group. He's a mortgage broker. And finally, Kay Pugh, who's a realtor with Keller Williams out of Bryn Mawr. So I just want to also tell you before we start about our upcoming teleseminars. So you can mark your calendars and make sure that you can call in on those days as well. All of these seminars start at 12:15 and last for 45 minutes. The next one is on November 5th, the conscious uncoupling of assets and liabilities. And that teleseminar, we're going to talk about the different financial issues that surround separation and divorce. The next one is on December 3rd, and that's called Two Homes. All we're discussing during that teleseminar is custody-related issues. And you would note that that's right around the holidays, so that would be great timing to tune in and listen if you have any questions or concerns about custody issues. The next one is on January 7th, called Living in Limbo. We're going to discuss different issues about the long period of time it sometimes takes to get divorced and when you're separated for a period of a few years but not yet divorced. Finally, on February 4th, we're going to talk about life after divorce. It's called Now What? And we're going to talk about how to move on and about the finality of divorce. We hope that these topics will cover several frequently asked questions that typically arise during the course of a divorce and provide some answers and guidance to our listeners. We also encourage any listener to submit questions ahead of time to our email address, which is uncouplingphilly@gmail.com. These seminars, by the way, are recorded and will be put up on our website, which is uncouplingphilly.com. If you know anyone who's going through a divorce or might benefit from some of the information that we are giving at these teleseminars, please pass our information along. With all of that said, let's start today's seminar. Again, the topic is should I stay or should I go? Discussing topics that surround first separating or when deciding to make that decision to separate and move forward with a divorce. Today we're going to hear primarily from our therapist, Liz Butler, and our divorce coach, Sheila Brennan. We're also going to hear a little bit from some of our other members after Liz and Sheila speak. So first, Liz Butler. Liz, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Hi, I'm Liz. I am in private practice. My training is in family therapy, and I practice outside of the Chestnut Hill section of Philadelphia and as well on the main line in Wynwood. I treat all members of the family. I do co-parenting, parenting effectiveness. I have hours during the week in the evening, and I welcome any people who are struggling to come on in.
All right.
I can help.
Thanks, Liz. I'm sure many clients or patients come to you telling you that they're questioning their marriage or saying something has gone wrong in their relationship, and that maybe they're thinking about the possibility of exploring a separation or divorce. Can you give our listeners some things to consider when they find themselves questioning their relationship?
Sure. It's true. I talk to many couples who find themselves feeling insecure about their relationship and feel, for whatever reason, unhappy with their marriage. It's upsetting, and folks feel like something must be really wrong if they feel like they are questioning their marriage. They can also feel really guilty and anxious about even saying the words to another person. One of the most common statements I hear when I speak with clients who question the viability of their marriage is, "I love him or her, but I've fallen out of love." And I usually respond, so what's your point? Most people are really surprised to learn that falling out of love is normal and a normal, typical developmental part of long-term monogamy. Movies, the media, TV, books, all convey the incorrect message that romantic love is forever, and that if you don't feel it, then something must be terribly wrong. Actually, there are 3 phases of love. The first is that romantic love, when we fall in love. This is the first phase where we have surges of brain chemicals associated with our loved one that make us feel euphoric when we're with them. Our heart races, sometimes we lose our appetite. We feel intensely connected to our beloved. We feel like we found our soulmate, and we will walk through eternity together, and in a weird way, we get a sense of immortality. We see our beloved in the best possible light and often idealize them. For example, I'll hear people say things like, he's not at all materialistic. He never stresses about money. I find that so refreshing. This is the time in the relationship that is usually very charged sexually, and the couple wants to be together as much as possible. The couple marries, they may have children, and then things will often start to shift. Couples will feel less connected, and as life marches on, the demands increase with career, money management, child rearing, and domestic responsibilities. The flame starts to dim. What was once experienced as endearing and charming may seem annoying or off-putting. What was once, he doesn't stress over money, is now, he is so irresponsible with finances. We call this phase disillusionment. Affection tends to diminish, and the couple experiences increased conflict. This is often when I start to see couples in therapy. The third phase is what we call mature love. That is when the couple chooses to love, go forward in the relationship. At this point, the spouses may not have loving feelings, but still find meaning and purpose in their relationship. There are shared values, dreams, and they value the life they've created, including children, extended family, and community. I once spoke with a man who confessed that his life without his wife just felt stupid. Loving is intentional. A couple commits to building a solid, strong partnership where the friendship and respect that they feel for each other is the foundation, where they can rebuild affection and closeness. This can be hard work, but it's hugely rewarding.
Liz, I want to go back to the disillusionment phase that you just talked about a minute ago. In your experience as a therapist, what should a person look for in the disillusionment phase that would point to a possible separation or divorce?
Well, there's a guy, Dr. John Gottman from the University of Washington, who did great research on couples and found that there are behaviors that couples demonstrate that put them at great risk for divorce, such as being critical, defensive, contemptuous, and what's called stonewalling or shutting down. But all of these behaviors can be corrected, and the couple can integrate more adaptive ways of relating to one another. The risk for divorce can go way down when the couple changes some of these behaviors. The only absolute predictor of divorce is a loss of fondness and admiration towards the spouse and a loss of respect. Once I hear spouses describe experiencing disrespect and just not liking their spouse, I become very concerned, and we start looking at the possibility that we may need to consider separation. Spousal abuse is another determinant for separation.
What else do you see when a couple seems ready for separation?
Well, if one or the other spouse is lapsing into a mood disorder, such as depression or anxiety, as a result of the marriage, we really need to explore the marriage to see if it's actually damaging. One scenario that I commonly hear that tips me off that separation is near is when a client tells me how let down they feel when they come home and see their spouse's car in the driveway. When someone describes dreading seeing their spouse after a workday, it usually means that they're in a really bad place. Again, that demonstrates a lack of friendship or a plain old lack of fondness. I will also at times ask the client this question. Think of your spouse's ideal spouse. What is she or he like? Think about that person's characteristics. Now, that person, a person you aspire to be? For example, if your spouse's ideal mate is ambitious and spontaneous, are those characteristics that you would like personally to develop in a way that would increase your self-esteem? If the person your spouse needs as a partner isn't someone you want to be, then perhaps we need to look at the viability of the relationship. Also, when a spouse is flirting a lot with other people or thinking about an affair, that also signals that something has gone really off track.
Well, let's pause a minute and talk about that. Because as a divorce attorney, I hear a lot about affairs and infidelity. So as a therapist, I'm interested in your perspective. So what about infidelities? Can couples ever come back from one or the other spouse's unfaithfulness?
This is a really important subject, one that I can't adequately address in this forum. However, let me see if I can give a little feedback about an infidelity. First, I make a distinction from an infidelity and an affair. I tell my clients that an infidelity is any relationship that is hidden and with whom the spouse has intentionally covered up and kept a secret, or that some of the interactions with this other person is kept from the spouse. Any relationship or interactions that you are hiding from your spouse is, in my book, an infidelity. Other therapists may see this differently, but these secret relationships almost always include some kind of betrayal of the marriage and siphons emotional energy and connection away from the marriage. In other words, just because you don't have a romantic or sexual contact with a secret friend doesn't mean that you haven't been unfaithful. The workplace is a really common place where these kinds of relationships can develop. A secret lunch, or an after-work happy hour, texts that you keep hidden, a friendship that includes excessive emotional support, or sharing recreational or personal interests such as concerts or fine arts or politics that you share with another person without the knowledge of your spouse is a betrayal of the marriage. These may be considered pre-affairs or affairs of the heart. Nevertheless, they are corrosive to the marriage, and the couple will need extensive therapy to reestablish trust and healing. Now, an affair is when there has been romantic or sexual intention or acting out. An affair is almost always more difficult for marriages to heal from or get over, but many, many couples achieve what we call rapprochement, or reuniting, reaffirming the marriage. This is an intense and difficult process that requires humility, compassion, commitment, and patience. A book that I always invite couples to read is After the Affair by Janice Abrams Spring. Her research is very comprehensive with affairs, and she gives wonderful roadmaps for couples to follow. I really love her work.
All right, so I hear a lot of times couples who decide to stay together for the children. Can you give us a little insight on that?
Sure. Children undoubtedly do better in an intact household. Divorce should absolutely be the last resort. If, however, the marriage is tearing the parents apart so much they are always fighting, demeaning the other parent, or one or both becoming depressed or anxious due to the marriage, it may be better to end the marriage with dignity and compassion. One thing parents do, which is somewhat misguided, is wait until the children go off to college. This is a really inopportune time for kids. Going to college is the most difficult life cycle due to the scary transition from childhood to adulthood. College freshmen really need a stable home to come back to. Going off to college and living in a dorm, then coming home to an unfamiliar living situation is very destabilizing. It would actually be better for the parents to separate in high school and establish mom's house and dad's house before they leave for college so they can return to a familiar lifestyle.
So, Liz, what about the feelings of guilt that sometimes associate with a separation? What do you say to a patient who realize that they really want to divorce, but they feel guilty because they took vows in a religious ceremony and they feel that they're morally obligated to keep their promise?
You know, Drew, I hear this a lot, and I really appreciate the clients want to adhere to their core beliefs, including their moral and religious orientations and how that relates to their commitment and integrity. I actually have theological and pastoral training, and when appropriate, I will integrate clients' spiritual concerns into our work based on their faith tradition. I treat people of all faiths, and we discuss their embedded values regarding and divorce. These are rich and meaningful discussions, and they can assist clients' growth and developing spiritually, personally, and as a couple. However, when these concerns require more specific religious doctrine, I will almost always refer them back to clergy to discuss this if the concern is more of a religious nature. I have yet, in 25 years of practice, had a client come back and tell me that their pastor, priest, or rabbi insists that they stay in a destructive, damaging relationship because of their marital vows. And clergy almost always encourage ongoing marital therapy to see if the couple can somehow find ways to stay together. But if not, I usually hear that they recommend offering compassion to self and to the spouse in these situations.
All right. Thank you, Liz. Appreciate your insight. Next, we're going to turn over to Sheila Brennan. Sheila, are you there? No. 1 second, we're going to get Sheila.
Drew.
Yes, are you there?
Hi. Sorry.
Wonderful. Sheila, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi. So, as you said, my name is Sheila Brennan, and I'm a divorce coach, and I practice in the greater Philadelphia area. And what I do with my clients is to help clients create a strategy or a plan around their divorce. Oftentimes, people approach divorce, they come into my office, they go into the attorney's office, as you probably will attest, and they say, I want to get divorced. And they have no plan at all. And I liken it to, I want to get married. Well, there's a lot of steps you have to take in order to make a wedding happen and to end up being married. Similarly, there's a lot of things that you have to do and think about and consider when you want to get divorced. So what I do is help them to create what does it look like and to really create almost an image of what they will, what will happen going through the divorce as well as maybe a little bit post-divorce, but definitely through the business of divorce.
Okay. Now, Sheila, I know that when people think about divorce, they usually think about two people fighting about everything from their pensions in the house to the dishes and the pots and pans, kind of like War of the Roses. So do people really have options when they're going through a divorce?
They do have options, Drew. There are several different ways to get divorced, and I'll go through 6 of them right now. So the first one is pro se, and it comes from the Latin term and means on behalf of themselves. So basically means that the person is going to try to get divorced without using an attorney. So they'll be advocating for their own behalf before a court. It's not recommended by the court systems for many reasons. The court process is very complicated. Often people will opt to represent themselves if they don't have the funds to hire an attorney or have decided that maybe they can do a better job of representing themselves because they've already gone and come away disillusioned with the system. It's not recommended, but it is a possibility. Then the next one that is another option that you have is mediation. So mediation is a process by which you and your spouse agree that you will disclose all of your information and work with a mediator to reach an agreement about your finances and how you will divide your assets and your debt, and a workable schedule for the kids, a schedule that will work for your family specifically. You can hire your own attorney to review the agreement that's created by the mediator, and it's important to know that the mediator acts as a neutral third party. Mediators are often attorneys or therapists or therapists who have received extensive mediation training.
And I know we'll probably hear from Bill in a little bit more about mediation, but can only a certain couple mediate at the end of their marriage?
No, not at the end of a divorce. It's unless you're one of the small percentage that goes to a trial in the country, you have to end up really reaching an agreement with your spouse, usually with the help of attorneys. So, but there's other ways that you can get divorced, and one of them is called collaborative. So in collaborative divorce, clients work towards a settlement with their attorneys and other divorce professionals, including divorce coaches, without the threat of going to court. So in a true collaborative divorce agreement, if the parties aren't able to reach an agreement between the two of them, the attorneys on the case must excuse themselves and are not able to represent the client in court, which means that the clients have to find new attorneys who will go to court with them. The threat of having to hire a new attorney and start over is a catalyst to reach a mutually satisfaction agreement within the collaborative divorce arena. The next one is cooperative. So this form of divorce is a cross between mediation, collaboration, and litigation. Most likely, there is at least one attorney on retainer. The couple agrees to sit together cooperatively to reach an acceptable agreement to end their marriage. You don't have to be friends with your spouse, but you do have to make every attempt to be reasonable. And sometimes reasonable is a stretch. If you must use the courts to decide the outcome of specific areas of your settlement, if you're in a cooperative divorce, trying to come to the end of your marriage with cooperatively, you still have the flexibility to petition the court with your existing attorney if you need to.
Why don't you explain a little bit about arbitration and litigation?
So binding arbitration is a process by which the attorneys, so each of you hires an attorney, and the attorneys present the facts of the case to an arbitrator, usually a retired judge or family law attorney or a practicing family law attorney. The arbitrator reviews the details of the situation and presents rulings and orders that are binding. That means you aren't able to appeal them to a higher level in the court system. So if you don't like the outcome, you're out of luck at that point. An arbitration hearing can be scheduled usually in a more timely manner than a trial at the courthouse. And the last one that we are probably most familiar with, thanks to movies like Kramer versus Kramer and The War of the Roses, is litigation. So this is what we envision when we think of divorce. I'm exaggerating a little bit here. It's two acrimonious clients, a couple of egocentric divorce attorneys, not you, Drew, but, you know.
Try not to take offense to that, Sheila.
Right. And thank you for not taking offense. And then often destructive outcomes. Unfortunately, some people on the litigation route, are on the litigation route because of the contentiousness between them. It's in your best interest as a spouse, soon-to-be former spouse, to find a way to be as civil as possible with your spouse. Try to remember that no one knows your family and your financial situation better than you. If you want an appointed court officer to decide how you'll share your kids over Christmas break, then this is the path that maybe works best for you. So that's it. That's the 6 different ways, 6 different options that people have who are approaching divorce, that they know that they can take the course that is best suited to their situation.
Thank you, Sheila. I just have one more question for you. Can you just talk a little bit? What were talking about, and what you kind of touched on, there's more involved in a divorce than just hiring a divorce attorney, obviously. So tell me a little bit about the advantages of having the right team members on your team when you're going through a divorce.
So I wrote my term paper on the team approach to divorce. Divorce is a significant life transition, and it really is in your best interest as the consumer to find someone who can help you with finances. Go to a coach. You don't know anything about, most of us don't know anything about divorce. I didn't know it when I was going through my divorce. But you need a lawyer, you need a financial person, you need someone who's going to help you with your insurance, someone who will help you with your estate after you get divorced. You need a whole new estate plan and a will. And you might need to sell your house, you might need to buy a house, you might need a mortgage person, you might need a realtor. There are so many people, so many professionals out there who are willing to be part of your divorce team and to help you in the most efficient way get through this transition.
Great. Thank you, Sheila. Very well said. Mark, I want to turn it over to you. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
My name is Mark Bradford. I am a forensic accountant. I do the litigation, the accounting side of the divorce, the forensic side, information gathering and whatnot, and making sure that everything's understood what's going on. I'm a certified public accountant. I'm also a certified fraud examiner, and I work in Philadelphia, surrounding communities, New Jersey also.
All right, Mark, so at the beginning of a divorce, a client comes to you. What do you usually tell them to look for, and what do you tell them to consider as far as the financial piece of their divorce is concerned?
Well, as Sheila said, you know, getting married is complicated. It involves a lot of planning. Getting divorced is also complicated and involves a lot of planning from a financial standpoint. You know, I usually start out trying to gauge their knowledge of what's going on financially with the marriage. Do they know what the bank accounts are? Do they know how the financial flow is? How much money is being made? Do they have access to Do they have access to the bank accounts? Do they have access to the tax return? I want to get an idea of where they're at mentally in terms of the knowledge of what's going on.
Okay. What information would you tell a client to look for at the beginning stages of a divorce?
Basically, I mean, I ask them to dig around. You know, see what they can find in the house. Make lists. Get ideas. You know, what kind of jobs had both spouses had in the past that they might have retirement accounts for that are dormant somewhere that they're going to have to get information on to see where they're at. Watch the mail. See what statements are coming in. Get a hold of the tax return. See what's in the interest and dividend section of the tax return. Are there K-1s or there 1099s attached to the tax return? You really want to make a list of the key documents so that you know the questions that need to be asked when the time comes.
So maybe it's fair to say in the very beginning it's a educate yourself process before you move forward.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to look at it as a business. There's a lot of personal stuff going on here, but when you come down to the financial side, you have to really treat it as a business transaction. You can't take it personally. You have to be logical, and that's what we try to help them out with. The more emotion that you have in a divorce, the more costly it's going to be at the end of the day. So we try to, I personally try to help them stay focused and on track.
Great, good point. All right, next, Bill, let's turn it over to you. Tell us about yourself and what you do.
Sure, thanks, Drew. My name's Bill Donahue. I've been a divorce mediator for about 20 years. I'm also a divorce attorney. And I wanted to go back through to a question that you had asked Sheila about who should mediate and when is mediation appropriate. The truth is that almost any couple would benefit from mediation as opposed to going into litigation. There are some myths about mediation. The most is people think that they have to be amicable, that they have to be getting along. I specialize in working with high conflict couples, and they are often the people who most need mediation because they're the ones that tend to spend fortunes and years going through the litigation process. So I work with people who are very high conflict, and a big part of the role of a mediator is to help them get past that conflict so that they can essentially do what Mark was just talking about and taking the emotion out of the process. The other myth with mediation is that people who have a lot of money, high income, high net worth, or have complex financial lives are not appropriate candidates for mediation. That's not true either. We use all the same experts, the same professionals in the mediation process that we use in litigation. So there are some people for whom mediation may not be appropriate. If there has been abuse or domestic violence, sometimes mediation is not appropriate. But other than that, it's at least worth it for any couple to give mediation a shot before they become embroiled in litigation.
Thanks, Bill.
Sure.
And Bill, I want you to plug your book because I think it's wonderful that you wrote a book about mediation. Go ahead and explain that a little bit.
Thank you. Yeah, I wrote a book a couple of years ago. It's called Reconcilable Differences, A Consumer's Guide to Divorce Mediation. And it essentially outlines divorce law, and it looks at probably 10 or 15 couples that I've worked with over the years and how they address very difficult issues, some very high conflict issues, and how they resolve them in the mediation process.
All right. Thank you, Bill. It's a great resource for sure.
Thank you.
All right, Valerie, are you there?
I'm here.
Valerie, I want to turn it over to you. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about
Hi, everyone. First, let me give you a little background of where our investment management comes into play in divorce. Our firm, Hoteling Investment Management, plans and invests for individuals and organizations. And through our Wealth for Women program, I outreach to women who are in transitional stages such as divorce, retirement, or widowhood. And along with our expert research analysts, our portfolio managers, a financial planner, we try to create the income and the growth that divorcing women will need with their investable assets. We have a special focus working with divorced women, and we get them on the road to investing for their new lives and their independent futures as they receive their distributions. The process is inclusive, which means we educate our women clients through the steps of our planning and investing so they can have a full understanding of their financial landscape. So what I would advise a client coming to me on the precipice of divorce is exactly what Mark said. Gather as much material as you can to get the full scope of your assets. This is going to include all statements, material relating to IRAs, 401ks, pensions, insurance, bank accounts, appraisals of jewelry, collections like antiques, fine art, vacation homes. All of these are thrown into the pile to evaluate, your all's financial status. And I reiterate, do not forget the liabilities. They are thrown into the calculation as well. They're not only, the liabilities are not only credit card debt, but they're also mortgage and student loans, car loans, bank pledges. These are going to be tallied up, and both of you are responsible for negotiating, dividing it up. It doesn't necessarily go away, or one spouse or the other is responsible for it. You'll have to negotiate that. So I look forward to speaking a little bit more about this next time, but mostly next time I want to focus on the importance of understanding the true value of your investment assets and splitting those up and trying to figure out which of those assets are going to be best for you to negotiate for your financial future and for your family's financial future. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. All right, Allie, I want to turn it over to you. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Hi, I'm Allie Collier with Johnson, Kendall & Johnson, and I have been working in personal insurance for over 10 years. Next week, or next webinar when we talk, we're going to speak a little bit more about once you make the decision to separate and one spouse moves out of the house, you have joint property in both names. How do you need to insure this property? Or is it still appropriate to have a joint auto policy or both names on the home? These are often afterthoughts because of all the other emotional decisions that are going on during that time. So it really helps to have someone who has experience with this and who understands the risks and who needs to be insured where when you're going through the separation process. And we'll talk a little bit more about that next time.
All right, great. Thanks, Allie. All right, so that concludes our seminar. I just want to remind everybody that the next teleseminar is scheduled for November 5th, again at 12:15, and we're going to be discussing the conscious uncoupling of assets and liabilities. So one of the main areas of contention in a divorce is, of course, dividing up assets. Who gets the house? How do you divide up the retirement? So we're going to have a discussion exclusively on those issues. And then the session after that, which is December 3rd, again, will focus only on child custody issues, which is another, obviously, hot topic as you go through divorce. So we encourage everybody to mark that on your calendars and register ahead of time for that seminar.
If anyone has any questions for the group, you can reach us at uncouplingphilly@gmail.com. It's a confidential email, and we'll make sure it gets to the right panelist.
And then we'll address your question on the next teleseminar. All right? Well, good. All right. Thanks, everybody, again for listening, and we hope to have you on the call the next time. You good?